The Queen is dead, but is the UK. Charles, her son, who was Prince Charles, now the King, is as compromised a figure as there could be. This is authored by Tom Luongo via Goats and Guns blog on Zero Hedge. He said, I wrote a scathing piece on new UK Prime Minister Liz Truss the other day because I had to. Truss, I believe, is everything I said she is. Sadly, she was also the best choice among the Tories to potentially carry Brexit to its real fruition. Queen Elizabeth II finally gave up this mortal coil, and say what you want about the British Crown and its perfidiousness throughout the centuries. Elizabeth was, I believe, something different. I'm no royalist or even a fan of the Brits at the geopolitical level. I've spit enough fire and brimstone at them for their provincial attitudes towards all of their former colonies to level mountains. The British aristocracy is a corrupt and enabling of the corrupt as any group of people in human history. And many of the people they have enabled have no intention of giving up that power, hence the mess we see in Europe and the UK. For all the complaints I level at our own government, being in the pay and service of foreign actors, I more than recognize the UK is dealing with the same problem. But that said, I have a more balanced view of Elizabeth II and will not be dancing on her grave this morning. In fact, I remind you of the many posts I wrote back in 2018-19 about Brexit, Johnson and Trump bringing the Queen back on the chessboard to help get us out of the crisis we're in now. The British Crown has been a captured piece of generations to British globalists and communists, but I repeat myself, they have dominated British foreign and domestic policy for decades. And if there's one thing we know about Elizabeth, she hates commies. Sadly, so much of what we hoped for died when Davos stole the 2020 elections, destroying the Trump-Johnson-Elizabeth axis of power. So who do you think was really the target of COVID? Us, the plebs? No, it was the Fed, Trump, Queen. Davos got 2 of 3. It ain't bad, as the song goes, but with all 3, they can't win. That's the most important part of Elizabeth's story. As Queen, she backed Brexit. Now, say what you want about what Brexit unleashed, the multiple power vacuums it created, and the confusion of who has sought to profit from it. In the end, Brexit was an immense, world-shaking statement of popular sovereignty. On this issue alone, Queen Elizabeth II paid Hans Hope's trenchant analysis from 20 years ago in his book, Democracy, the God That Failed, that as bad as it is, even monarchy is a superior form of government than democracy, because at least a monarch has a property right in their people. Whereas in democracy, it's just one big tragedy of the commons and all the corruption, graft, sloth, and banality that implies. The Crown at least purports to stand for something, and by backing Brexit, Elizabeth stood for her people over those jackals in Parliament, the House of Lords, and the civil service working so hard to tear them down. Trump understood that Elizabeth was not Davos, and Brexit the chance to really change the dynamic between not only the US and the UK, but also between those two and Russia and China. There was an opportunity for a negotiated settlement with them on behalf of the global South and avoid the crisis we're in right now. Elizabeth understood this as well, but was mostly powerless to stop the train because the UK government and its entrenched aristocracy is a cesspit. Trump also understood that Charles was as compromised a figure as you could be. The manila folder on Charles is more than thick enough to ensure he does as he's told. Elizabeth, on the other hand, was no one's toady. It simply was not her. It doesn't mean she was a heroic figure we should lionize. People are complicated. Stories are never as cut and dried as we would like them to believe. Charles is still taking the throne after all. I view the British Crown the same way I view the Vatican, corrupt, and the power it wielded caused mission creep over the centuries in defining, quote-unquote, their interests. You'll note how they've corrupted the United States with this same idea of interests. The imperial mindset is one of the stickiest things in human behavior. But at some point, pure survival takes over and pragmatism trumps all those old ambitions and machinations. The problem, of course, is that the jackals have weakened everything to the point of unleashing the worst people to run around doing stuff. So when Trump lost the stage, was set off for was to set off Johnson and reverse Brexit. Davos made their move against Johnson this summer because, as Alex Craner reminded me in an email the other day, the British cabinet actually runs the country, not Parliament. This was why Mark Sedwill, being both cabinet secretary and head of the civil service under Theresa May, was so dangerous. He was really prime minister, directing Brexit negotiations, doing Davos's bidding. It's also why Johnson firing him as nearly the first thing he did when taking power was the definitive statement of his position on Brexit, the Queen, and the UK as a sovereign nation. Sedwell's power and betrayal on the UK showed that the Brexit deal May negotiated and left for Johnson to clean up. One of the things she left behind was the Northern Ireland Protocol. It was Elizabeth that helped along the destruction of May and the ascension of Johnson. None of this excuses their activities in Ukraine, of course, but that's a different matter. Davos wanted Johnson gone because they wanted Brexit undermined. The Northern Ireland Protocol is the key to this. There is a provision in the Brexit agreement where the NI, Northern Ireland Protocol, is to expire in a couple of weeks. There was a 2-year time limit on it, and if UK did not think the EU, the European Union, were acting in good faith or whatever, they could cancel it and the UK would now be in charge of the border crossings. Conversely, if the Northern Ireland Protocol remained in place, the European Union will still set trade policy for the UK. Sunak was supposed to win and make sure the UK negotiated down. Liz Truss has been at the forefront of pushing the legislation, now in the House of Lords, that would invoke that article within the Brexit agreement and end the tussle over Northern Ireland. So this is the issue on which Brexit hangs. It's why Davos could not wait for Liz to die before, Liz meaning the Queen, before removing Johnson and creating a fight within the Tories for control over the party. It's why Johnson kept saying they would have to remove him from office bodily. In the end, Bojo may have been a clown, but it looks like he was, on balance, a patriot. The goal was for Davos to get their dark-skinned Tony Blair, Rishi Sunak. They failed and got Johnson's Foreign Secretary, Liz Truss. And I think Elizabeth held on long enough to see this through to completion for the UK to be independent of Europe and re-establish its sovereignty. Truss then looks like a counterweight to Charles' clear alliance with Davos on climate change and the Great Reset. As we know, Charles wants, he's a WEF person, and he wants the Great Reset. Now, then again, he may surprise us now that he has the crown. I won't speculate further. The path to that is having nationalists in control of the cabinet, who in turn control Parliament and the civil service. Now, all of this analysis depends on how Truss handles Northern Ireland. If she stands her ground and wins above, then the above is correct and Brexit will eventually be achieved. Queen Elizabeth's legacy will be preserved. If she caves, Theresa May style, then the UK will be torn apart by Brussels Davos to strip mine it. Remember, for Schwab's plan to work in his mind, everybody must be brought low. If only Europe is destroyed, he wins nothing except historical vilification. Remember what I said about Elizabeth hating commies? Now, as for Truss, if she begins backing off on the foreign policy front and focuses all of her attention on domestic policy, then the UK could avoid some of the damage clearly aimed at them. If she does not and continues Johnson's insane belligerence against Russia, then the UK's future is far murkier. For now, the early returns are good. Her lifting the ban on fracking and oil and gas exploration is exactly the thing the UK needs to do. It will put the Scottish nationals, led by Nicola Sturgeon, on their back foot. Expect increasingly strident calls for Scottish independence in the coming months. Will Truss have the strength to ride herd over all of this? I doubt it, especially with Biden Obama in the White House. This may all change post-midterms here in the US. and Italy's elections in 2 weeks. As it stands on balance, Queen Elizabeth did the best she could with a terrible post-war hand as monarch. The march towards this moment was well beyond her control. If in the end she was able to help the UK out of the mess she could not or did not do enough to stop, then her legacy will have been a good one. And this is on Zero Hedge by Tom Luongo via Gold, Goats and Guns blog. Please leave your comments. Thank you for your support. Kindly support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.